Oh, you know that moment when your gut screams something's wrong, but you ignore it? 3 days ago, I found a receipt in my husband's coat pocket. Dinner for two. His text. Working late. Then tonight, New Year's Eve, he casually says, Vanessa's joining us. She's alone. Vanessa. He's just a coworker. The one who always laughs too loud at his jokes. So I did something bold. I invited Ethan, the shy intern my husband bullies daily. Now, as the clock ticks toward midnight, secrets will spill, glasses will shatter, and someone's walking out of this dinner alone. This isn't just a party. It's war. Smash that like button and follow for chapter 1 now. The receipt. The receipt was tucked deep into the pocket of Daniel's coat, the expensive wool one I'd given him last Christmas, the one he always wore to important meetings. My fingers brushed against it while I was hanging up his jacket, and something about the way it was folded, hidden, made me pause. I pulled it out slowly as if it might burn me. Bistro Lumiere. December 28th. 2 glasses of Malbec. 1 truffle pasta. My stomach dropped. Daniel had told me he was at a business dinner that night. A last-minute meeting with a client, he'd said. But clients don't order truffle pasta. Clients don't split a bottle of Malbec. And clients definitely don't leave receipts tucked away like secrets. I stood there, staring at the slip of paper, my pulse loud in my ears. I could have brushed it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a client. But then my phone buzzed in my back pocket, snapping me out of the spiral. A text from Daniel. Babe, is it cool if Vanessa comes to dinner tonight? She doesn't have plans for New Year's. Vanessa. Of course. Vanessa, with her perfectly highlighted hair and her laugh that was just a little too loud whenever Daniel told a joke. Vanessa, who had accidentally texted him good night, handsome, a month ago and swore it was meant for someone else. Vanessa, who always found a reason to lean just a little too close to him at office parties. My fingers tightened around my phone. I could have said no. I should have said no. But something hot and sharp coiled in my chest, and before I could stop myself, I was typing back. Sure. I'm inviting someone too. No explanation. No details. Let him wonder. Let him fidget. I didn't even have to think about who to invite. The name came to me instantly, Ethan Carter. Ethan, the quiet, wide-eyed intern Daniel had spent the last 3 months mocking. The kid who'd made the mistake of suggesting a better filing system at work, only for Daniel to laugh in his face and nickname him Excel Boy. The one who stuttered through presentations while Daniel smirked from the back of the room. I found Ethan's contact in my phone. Daniel had complained about him so often, I'd memorized the name, and sent the invite before I could second-guess myself. Hey, Ethan. It's Claire, Daniel's wife. We're having a small New Year's dinner tonight. You should come. 7 p.m. His reply came almost instantly. Wait, really? Me? I smiled. Yes, you. Be there. Now, hours later, I stood in our dining room, adjusting the silverware for 4 instead of 2. The candles were lit, the champagne was chilled, and the air hummed with something unspoken, something dangerous. The doorbell rang. I took a slow breath, smoothing my dress. Game on. The arrival. The doorbell echoed through our apartment, sharp and insistent. I took one last glance around the dining room, the flickering candles, the perfectly folded napkins, the champagne flutes catching the dim light, before walking to the door. My heels clicked against the hardwood, each step measured, deliberate. I could feel Daniel watching me from the kitchen, his brow slightly furrowed. He'd been quiet since my text about inviting someone, his usual confidence replaced by a tense curiosity. He hadn't asked who it was. Maybe he assumed it was one of my friends. Someone harmless. He was about to be very, very wrong. I opened the door, and there she was, Vanessa, wrapped in a red dress that clung to her like it had been painted on. Her lips, glossy and dark, curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Claire, she said, her voice too sweet. Thanks for having me. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her perfume, something expensive and floral, filling the space between us. Behind her, the cold December air rushed in, biting against my skin. Daniel appeared in the hallway, his face lighting up in a way that made my stomach twist. Vanessa, he said, too warmly. You made it. She air-kissed his cheek, her hand lingering on his arm just a second too long. Wouldn't miss it. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around the edge of the door. Glad you could join us. Vanessa handed me a bottle of wine, something French, no doubt picked to impress, and I took it with a nod, already turning to set it aside. That's when I heard the second knock. Lighter. Hesitant. Daniel frowned. You expecting someone else? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked back to the door and pulled it open. Ethan Carter stood on the threshold, his shoulders hunched slightly as if bracing for impact. He wore a blazer that was just a little too big for him, the sleeves swallowing his wrists, and his free hand clutched a cheap bottle of wine like a lifeline. His dark hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run his fingers through it one too many times on the way over. For a moment, he just stared at me, his eyes wide behind his glasses. Then, softly, he said, Hi, Mrs. Lawson." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Daniel's voice cut through it like a knife. "Ethan." Ethan flinched, just barely, but he didn't look away from me. I brought wine." He held it out, the label peeling slightly at the corner. I took it from him, my fingers brushing against his. His hands were cold. "Thank you, Ethan," I said, deliberately warm. "Come in." I stepped aside, and Ethan shuffled past me, his shoulders tense. He stopped just inside the doorway, his gaze flicking between Daniel and Vanessa, who was watching him with thinly veiled amusement. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Claire," he said low. "A little warning next time?" I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "About what?" His nostrils flared, but before he could respond, Vanessa let out a soft laugh. "Well," she said, her eyes gleaming, "this just got interesting." Ethan swallowed hard, his fingers fidgeting with the cuff of his blazer. I could see the exact moment Daniel's usual mockery rose to the surface, the way his lip curled, the dismissive flick of his gaze. But then Ethan straightened his shoulders, and he looked Daniel dead in the eye. "Happy New Year, Mr. Lawson," he said, his voice steady. Something shifted in the air. Daniel blinked, and for the first time all night, I smiled for real. The toast. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Ethan stood there, shoulders squared, his cheap wine still clutched in my hand. Daniel's expression flickered between disbelief and irritation, his lips pressed into a tight line. Vanessa just watched, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass with a smirk. I cleared my throat. "Let's sit." Daniel shot me a look, one that said we'll talk later, but I ignored him, gesturing toward the dining table. Ethan hesitated before following, his posture stiff, like he was bracing for impact. The table was set for 4, the candles casting flickering shadows across the polished silverware. Vanessa slid into the seat beside Daniel without missing a beat, her dress whispering against the chair. Ethan hovered awkwardly before taking the spot across from her, his fingers tapping nervously against his thighs. I set the wine bottles down, Vanessa's expensive French red and Ethan's peeling label bargain, and reached for the champagne. "Let's start with this." The cork popped with a satisfying crack, and golden liquid fizzed into the flutes. I handed them out, watching as Daniel accepted his with a tight nod, Vanessa with a coy smile, and Ethan with both hands, like he was afraid he'd drop it. Daniel raised his glass first. "To new friends," he said, the pause deliberate, his gaze lingering on Ethan. Vanessa giggled, clinking her glass against his. "Cheers." Ethan's fingers tightened around his flute. I lifted mine, locking eyes with Daniel. "And to old ones." The tension was so thick you could carve it. We drank. The champagne was crisp cold, but it did nothing to ease the heat simmering under my skin. Then silence. The kind that makes you hyper-aware of every clink of silverware, every too loud swallow. Vanessa twirled a strand of hair around her finger, her eyes darting between Daniel and me. Ethan stared at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Daniel cleared his throat. "So, Ethan," he said, leaning back in his chair, "how's Excel these days?" The old nickname. The old jab. Ethan's jaw twitched, but before he could respond, Vanessa cut in. "Oh my God, that's who you are!" She laughed, pointing at him. "You're the kid who tried to reorganize the entire filing system." Ethan's ears turned red. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, Excel boy here thought he could fix what wasn't broken." I set my glass down a little too hard. "Actually," I said, sweet as poison, Ethan's system saved the marketing team 12 hours of work last quarter. Daniel's smirk faltered. Ethan blinked at me, surprised. Vanessa tilted her head. Wait, really? Really? I said, smiling. Daniel must have forgotten to mention that part. Daniel's fingers tightened around his fork. I didn't forget. But then Ethan spoke. It's fine, he said, quiet but firm. I'm used to not getting credit. The words hung in the air, sharp as shattered glass. Daniel's face darkened. Vanessa's smile turned brittle. And me. I took another sip of champagne, hiding my own smile behind the rim. This was just the beginning. The truth bomb. The air between us crackled with something dangerous. Daniel's grip on his fork had turned his knuckles white, but Ethan didn't flinch. That surprised me most of all, the way he held his ground now, after months of shrinking under Daniel's mockery. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, leaned forward with false sympathy. Don't feel bad, Ethan. I'm sure Daniel didn't mean to take credit for your work. She shot Daniel a look that was supposed to be playful but carried an edge. Right, Dan? Daniel's jaw worked. I didn't take credit. But you didn't correct anyone either, Ethan said quietly. The words landed like a grenade. I watched, fascinated, as Daniel's face cycled through emotions. Anger, embarrassment, then cold calculation. He forced a laugh, waving his hand like this was all some silly misunderstanding. Come on, kid. If you wanted recognition, you should have spoken up in the meeting. Ethan's fingers traced the stem of his champagne flute. I tried. You talked over me. A muscle in Daniel's temple jumped. Vanessa, sensing blood in the water, pressed on. Well, that's just office politics, sweetie. You'll learn. I saw the exact moment Ethan snapped. His head lifted, and for the first time all night, his shoulders relaxed. A strange calm settled over him as he looked at Daniel, not with fear, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Pity. You know, Ethan said, voice steady. It's funny. Everyone at the office thinks you're this brilliant strategist. But the truth? You're just good at taking other people's ideas and making them sound like yours. Daniel's chair scraped back. Watch it. Ethan didn't blink. Like the Reynolds account last month. That was Jessica's pitch, not yours. She only let you take lead because... Enough! Daniel's palm hit the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. His breathing had gone shallow, his pupils dilated. Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. Dan! I sat perfectly still, watching my husband unravel. Ethan took a sip of champagne, unfazed. Because she's sleeping with the VP and didn't want it looking obvious when she got promoted. The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Daniel's face drained of color. And me. I felt something I hadn't in months. A spark of genuine amusement. You didn't know, I said to Daniel, my voice light. About Jessica and Mark? His head whipped toward me. You knew. Of course. I shrugged. Jessica told me at the summer picnic. I assumed everyone knew. Daniel looked like he'd been sucker punched. Vanessa recovered first, her manicured nails tapping against the table. Well, this is enlightening. Ethan met my eyes across the table, and for the first time, I saw the ghost of a smile tug at his lips. Daniel stood abruptly. I need another drink. As he stalked toward the kitchen, Vanessa rose to follow, but not before throwing Ethan a look that was equal parts warning and newfound respect. That left just Ethan and me at the table. He exhaled shakily, his bravado fading now that the moment had passed. I probably shouldn't have said that. I reached for the champagne bottle, refilling his glass. Oh, I disagree. The kitchen door swung shut behind Daniel and Vanessa, muffling their heated whispers. Ethan leaned closer, voice dropping. He's been doing it for years, you know. Taking credit. Pushing people down. The whole office talks about it. I swirled my wine, watching the legs slide down the glass. I know. Ethan hesitated. Then why? The kitchen door burst open. Daniel stood there, his tie loosened, a fresh whiskey in hand. His eyes locked onto Ethan with terrifying focus. Let's play a game, he said, his voice deceptively calm. Vanessa reappeared behind him, lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something told me the real fireworks were just beginning. The game. Daniel's fingers drummed against his whiskey glass, the ice cubes clinking like a countdown. That smile, the one that never meant anything good, spread across his face as he surveyed the table. A game, I repeated, my voice carefully neutral. Vanessa clapped her hands together, her bracelets jangling. Oh, I love games. Ethan shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around his champagne flute. He knew better than anyone that when Daniel suggested a game, someone always lost. Daniel pulled out his phone and set it on the table with deliberate slowness. Let's play. Truth or shot? Vanessa giggled. Like truth or dare, but with alcohol. Better. Daniel's eyes gleamed. You refuse to answer a question, you take a shot. But here's the twist. He reached into the cabinet behind him and pulled out a bottle of tequila, so expensive it still had the price tag dangling from its neck. None of that cheap shit. I recognize that bottle. We've been saving it for our anniversary. Ethan swallowed hard. I don't think. Great. Daniel cut him off, already pouring 4 shots. The liquid was so clear it looked like water, but the sharp scent of agave filled the air. I'll go first. His gaze locked onto Ethan. Truth or shot, Excel boy? The old nickname hung between them like a challenge. Ethan's throat worked, but he didn't look away. Truth. Daniel leaned forward. Why did you really come tonight? The question landed like a slap. Even Vanessa stiffened. Ethan's fingers twitched against the tablecloth. For a second, I thought he might actually reach for the shot glass. Then, because Claire asked me. His voice was steady. And because I wanted to see the look on your face when I walked in. A beat of stunned silence. Then, to my complete shock, Daniel laughed. Not his usual mocking chuckle, but a real, belly-deep laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Jesus Christ, he wheezed, wiping at his eyes. Okay, kid. Your turn. Ethan blinked, thrown by the reaction. Then he turned to Vanessa. Truth or shot? Vanessa's smile turned feline. Truth, darling. I've got nothing to hide. Ethan hesitated. Then, why did you really come tonight? Vanessa's polished facade cracked for half a second before she recovered, tossing her hair over one shoulder. Because Daniel invited me, of course. Ethan didn't blink. That's not an answer. Vanessa's lips pursed. For a heartbeat, I thought she might actually take the shot. Then, fine. She leaned forward, her cleavage nearly spilling out of that ridiculous red dress. I came because Daniel's been promising me a promotion for months, and I wanted to remind him what he'd be missing if he didn't deliver. Daniel choked on his whiskey. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sound startled even me, sharp and bright in the tense air. Vanessa turned to me, her eyes glittering. Your turn, Claire. Truth or shot? I didn't hesitate. Truth. She smiled, slow and cruel. When did you stop trusting your husband? The room went dead silent. Daniel's glass hit the table with a clunk. Vanessa! No, she purred. Those are the rules, Dan. She answers or she drinks. All eyes turned to me. I could feel Ethan watching me, his gaze heavy with something I couldn't name. Daniel's breathing had gone shallow, his fingers gripping the edge of the table like he was bracing for impact. I reached for my shot glass and pushed it away. 3 weeks ago, I said calmly, when I found the receipt for Bistro Lumiere in his coat pocket. Daniel's face drained of color. Claire. My turn. I turned to my husband, my voice sweet as poison honey. Truth or shot, Daniel? The pulse in his throat jumped. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely afraid. Shot! I smiled. Coward. I pushed the tequila toward him. His fingers shook as he picked it up, threw it back, and slammed the glass down hard enough to crack the base. Vanessa whistled low under her breath. Well, this is officially the best New Year's ever. Ethan's phone buzzed loudly on the table, breaking the tension. He glanced at it, then went pale. What? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. A text from an unknown number. Tell Claire to check her email. She'll want to see this. My blood ran cold. Daniel lunged for the phone. What the hell? But I was already pulling up my inbox. There at the very top was a message with no subject line. And one attachment. A photo. The photo. My fingers hovered over the screen, the unopened email glaring up at me like a live wire. The dining room had gone so quiet I could hear the ice melting in Daniel's abandoned whiskey glass. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Claire! I tapped the screen. The image loaded in jagged pieces. First a blur of color, then shapes, then... Oh God. It was Daniel. And Vanessa. In our bed. The sheets were rumpled, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds I'd installed myself last spring. Vanessa's red dress was pooled on the floor beside the nightstand where I kept my favorite book. Daniel's face was half turned toward the camera, his expression one I'd never seen before, rapt, hungry, unrecognizable. The date stamp in the corner read December 28th. The day of the receipt. The day he'd claimed he was at a business dinner. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that damn photo, the proof of what I'd suspected but hadn't let myself believe. Someone was speaking. Daniel, his voice strained and too loud, but the words dissolved into static before they reached me. Then a hand touched my wrist. Ethan. His fingers were warm, his grip steady. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The contact grounded me, pulled me back into my body, just in time to hear Daniel slam his fist on the table. Who sent that? He demanded, his face flushed with anger or shame. I couldn't tell which. Vanessa had gone very still, her manicured nails digging into her own thighs. That's obviously photoshopped, she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Ethan's thumb brushed against my pulse point once before he let go. The metadata's intact, he said quietly. It's real. Daniel rounded on him. Stay out of this, you little... Enough! My voice cut through the room like a knife. I set the phone down carefully, my movements precise, controlled. Inside, I was shaking apart. Outside, ice. Pure ice. Daniel's breath came in short, sharp bursts. Claire, let me explain. Explain what? I tilted my head. That this wasn't what it looked like. That you tripped and landed inside her. Vanessa made a strangled noise. Ethan coughed to cover what might have been a laugh. Daniel's face darkened. You invited him, he jabbed a finger at Ethan, to our home just to humiliate me, and now you're going to act like I'm the villain here? The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. I stood slowly, my palms flat on the table. No, Daniel. I invited Ethan because I knew you'd invited Vanessa. Because I knew something was going on. But this... I tapped the phone screen. This was just confirmation. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Then Vanessa did the unthinkable. She laughed. A soft, disbelieving chuckle that made all of us turn to stare. Oh my God, she said, shaking her head. You set him up. Daniel whirled on her. What the hell are you? She knew, Vanessa continued, her eyes locked on mine with something almost like respect. She knew, and she let you invite me, and she brought him, a nod toward Ethan, because she wanted you to see how it felt. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Daniel looked like he'd been gutted. And me. I reached for the tequila bottle and poured myself a shot. The liquid burned going down, but not nearly as much as the truth. Vanessa was right. I had known. Not about the affair, not for sure, but about the possibility of it. About the late nights, the sudden business trips, the way Daniel had started using a new cologne. The way he'd stopped touching me unless I initiated. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Until now. I set the empty glass down with a click. Well, I said, my voice remarkably steady. Now that we've all seen the elephant in the room, who's ready for dessert? The reckoning. The silence that followed my question was so complete, I could hear the faint hiss of candle wax dripping onto the tablecloth. Daniel's face had gone slack, his mouth slightly open like he couldn't quite process what I just said. Vanessa stared at me with something between horror and admiration. Ethan, poor Ethan, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. I'll get the dessert. Daniel finally found his voice. Claire, for God's sake. I didn't stop walking. The kitchen was cool and quiet, a sanctuary from the storm I'd left brewing in the dining room. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. The photo burned behind my eyelids every time I blinked. Daniel's bare shoulders, Vanessa's hair fanned across our pillows. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed hard against the bile rising in my throat. The cheesecake sat in the refrigerator, perfectly chilled under its dome of glass. I'd made it yesterday, Daniel's favorite, with a raspberry swirl. My hands didn't shake as I pulled it out. They should have, maybe. But they didn't. Voices carried from the dining room, too low to make out words but sharp with tension. Then a crash, glass breaking, and Vanessa's shrill, "Jesus Christ, Daniel." I took my time plating 4 slices, arranging each one just so. The raspberry sauce drizzled in perfect spirals. A mint leaf for garnish. When I returned, the scene before me was almost comical. Daniel stood by the shattered remains of his whiskey glass, his chest heaving. Vanessa had pressed herself against the far wall like she was ready to bolt. Only Ethan remained seated, his hands folded neatly in front of him, though his eyes flicked to me the moment I reappeared. I set the first plate in front of his place. "Try it," I said. "It's my grandmother's recipe." Daniel made a strangled noise. "Are you serious right now?" I didn't look at him as I served Vanessa next. "You always said my cheesecake was the best part of New Year's." Vanessa eyed her slice like it might be poisoned. Ethan picked up his fork. "It looks amazing," he said, and took a bite. His eyes widened. "Wow, that's incredible." A small, genuine smile tugged at my lips. "Thank you." Daniel's chair screeched as he kicked it back. "Stop this. Stop acting like everything's fine." I finally met his gaze. "What would you prefer I do, Daniel? Throw plates? Scream? Tear out her hair?" I nodded toward Vanessa, who flinched. "Would that make you feel better about fucking her in our bed?" Ethan coughed on his cheesecake. Daniel's face flushed an ugly red. "You want to do this here? In front of him?" He jabbed a finger at Ethan. "Yes," I said simply. "I do." Vanessa found her voice. "Look, Claire, I think we should." "Eat your dessert, Vanessa," I said without looking at her. "You've already had everything else that was mine." Ethan made a small, choke sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. "I'm done with this." He grabbed his phone and started for the door. "Of course you are," I called after him. "Walking away is what you do best." He froze, turned. His eyes were wild now, his breathing ragged. "You think this is all on me? You've been cold for months, Claire. You think I didn't notice you pulling away?" The accusation hit like a slap, because he wasn't wrong. I had pulled away. After the 3rd time I'd found receipts he couldn't explain. After the missed anniversaries, the empty promises, the way he'd started looking at me like I was a problem to solve rather than a woman to love. I set down the dessert server with a clink. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did pull away, but you didn't fight for me, Daniel. You just let me go." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Maybe. Or just the realization that he'd lost the upper hand. Vanessa cleared her throat. "Maybe I should." "No." Daniel's voice was rough. "Stay." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. "Let's finish this." Ethan stood abruptly. "I should go." I caught his wrist as he passed. "You don't have to." His pulse jumped under my fingers. "Yeah," he said softly. "I really do." The front door clicked shut behind him, leaving the 3 of us in a silence more suffocating than any argument. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Well, what now?" I picked up my fork and took a bite of cheesecake. The sweetness burst across my tongue, tart and rich and perfect. "Now," I said, "we eat dessert." And for the first time all night, I meant every word. The aftermath. The cheesecake tasted like ashes in my mouth, but I finished every bite. Daniel watched me the entire time, his untouched slice weeping raspberry sauce onto the china. Vanessa had given up all pretense of eating, her fork abandoned as she picked at her manicure with nervous fingers. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11, each toll like a hammer to my skull. 30 minutes until midnight. 30 minutes until the new year, and whatever fresh hell it might bring. Daniel finally broke the silence. "We need to talk. Alone." Vanessa stood, so fast her chair nearly toppled. "I'll just—" "No." My voice cut through the room sharper than the clock's chimes. "You wanted to be here, so badly, Vanessa. Stay." She froze, her gaze darting between me and Daniel like a cornered animal. For the first time all night, her perfect confidence wavered. The realization should have felt satisfying. It didn't. Daniel's jaw worked. "Claire, tell me something first." I set my fork down with deliberate care. "Was it just her? Or were there others?" Vanessa's breath hitched. Apparently, this wasn't a conversation she'd anticipated having. Daniel's fingers tightened around his water glass. What difference does it make? Humor me. The clock ticked. The candles sputtered. Somewhere outside, fireworks popped in the distance, early celebrants ringing in the new year without us. Daniel exhaled through his nose. Just her. Vanessa made a small, wounded noise. I almost laughed. You expected more, Vanessa? How disappointing for you. Daniel slammed his palm on the table. Enough. You wanted your pound of flesh, Claire. You got it. Now what? The question hung between us, heavy and unanswerable. What came after this? After the accusations, the revelations, the carefully constructed lies crumbling to dust? I looked at the man I'd married, really looked at him. The faint lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. The way his wedding band caught the candlelight. The stubborn set of his jaw that I'd once found endearing. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Daniel blinked. What? Tonight. Take your things and go. Vanessa made a strangled noise. Claire, you can't just. I can. I kept my eyes locked on Daniel's. And he will. Won't you, Daniel? Something unreadable flickered across his face. Anger, regret, maybe even relief. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then. Yeah. The word came out rough, broken. Yeah, okay. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. Daniel pushed back from the table, his chair screeching against the floor. I'll go pack. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. Take the guest room closet, too. Your winter coats are in there. The domesticity of it, dividing linens while our marriage collapsed, sent a hysterical bubble of laughter rising in my throat. I choked it down. Daniel paused in the doorway, his shoulders tense. Claire, don't. I couldn't bear to hear whatever half-assed apology he'd concocted. Just go. He went. Vanessa and I sat in silence, the remains of our ruined dinner between us. Outside, more fireworks popped, their colors flickering through the curtains. She cleared her throat. I never meant. Save it. I reached for the champagne bottle, refilling my glass despite the swimming sensation in my head. You should go too. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. She stood, smoothing her ridiculous red dress, and reached for her clutch. At the door, she paused. He's not worth it, you know. I looked up, startled. Vanessa's smile was bitter. Daniel, he's not worth either of us. And with that, she was gone. The house felt suddenly cavernous, the empty chairs and half-finished drinks mocking me. I drained my champagne in one go, the bubbles burning my throat. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, you okay? Simple. Direct. No pretense. I stared at the words until they blurred. Was I okay? I didn't know. I might never know again. But for the first time tonight, I knew one thing with absolute certainty I would be. The clock began to chime midnight. I picked up my phone and typed a single word. Yes. The first morning. The sunlight hit my face like an accusation. I blinked against the glare, my mouth cottony from too much champagne and not enough sleep. The other side of the bed yawned empty, the sheets still perfectly tucked. Daniel's pillow sat untouched, fluffed and mocking. I rolled over and checked my phone. 9:17 a.m. 3 missed calls from my sister. 5 texts from friends asking how our party went. And 1, buried at the bottom, sent at 1:23 a.m. Let me know if you need anything. Coffee. A listening ear. Whatever. Ethan. I stared at his name until my vision blurred. The kindness of it, the simple, uncomplicated decency, made something crack open in my chest. The doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it. Whoever it was could come back later, or better yet, never. But the ringing persisted, sharp and insistent. With a groan, I dragged myself out of bed, pulling on the robe Daniel had given me last Christmas. The silk whispered against my skin as I padded downstairs, my bare feet sticking to the hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw the top of a familiar tousled head. Ethan. He shifted from foot to foot, clutching 2 paper cups and a brown paper bag. His usual too-big blazer had been replaced with a worn leather jacket, and his hair looked like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. I opened the door. He jumped, nearly spilling the coffee. Oh, you're awake. I leaned against the doorframe. Barely. I brought. He held out the cups. Coffee. And bagels. I didn't know what you liked, so I got plain and everything. The scent of fresh coffee and warm bread wrapped around me. My stomach growled traitorously. You didn't have to do that. Ethan shrugged, his ears turning pink. I know. We stood there for a moment, the January air sharp between us. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car door slammed. Normal sounds for a normal morning, except nothing would ever be normal again. I stepped aside. Come in. Ethan hesitated, then crossed the threshold, his shoes squeaking on the polished floors. He set the coffee and bagels on the kitchen island, his gaze flicking around the room, the half-empty wine glasses still on the table, the abandoned cheesecake plates, the single forgotten red high heel by the stairs. Vanessa's. I grabbed the shoe and tossed it in the trash. Ethan pretended not to notice. Black right. He pushed one of the coffees toward me. That's how you took it last night. I blinked. You remembered. His lips quirked. I noticed things. I took a sip. Perfect temperature. Perfect strength. Like he'd asked the barista to make it exactly how I liked it. So, Ethan said, carefully peeling the lid off his own coffee. How are you? The question should have been easy. Fine. Okay. Hanging in there. But something about the way he asked, like he actually wanted to know, made honesty spill out of me. I don't know, I admitted. Numb, I think. Which is better than last night. Ethan nodded like this made perfect sense. Shock'll do that. I tore off a piece of everything bagel. The sesame seeds stuck to my fingers. Did you sleep? Not much. He rubbed at the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Kept thinking about everything. The photo. The confrontation. Daniel's face when I told him to leave. I swallowed a too big bite of bagel. Why did you come? Ethan stilled. I told you. Coffee in. No. I set my food down. Last night. Why did you really come to dinner? The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Ethan's throat worked as he searched for words. Finally, he met my eyes. Because you asked. That's simple. That complicated. I exhaled, long and slow. Thank you. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time since he'd arrived. Don't thank me yet. You haven't tried the everything bagel. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled both of us. Outside, the morning stretched on, bright and cold and full of possibilities. Inside, Ethan Carter sat at my kitchen island, stealing bites of my plain bagel when he thought I wasn't looking. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone. The offer. The coffee had gone cold, but neither of us moved to make more. Ethan's sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms dusted with dark hair and a silver watch that looked like it had seen better days. He spun it around his wrist absently as we sat at the kitchen island, the silence between us comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. So, he said finally, brushing crumbs from his fingers. What now? The question of the hour. I traced the rim of my coffee cup. Now I call a lawyer. Ethan nodded. Good. Then I changed the locks. Also good. And then... I hesitated. I have no idea. Ethan surprised me by laughing. It was a warm sound, rich and unguarded. That's the first honest thing anyone's said to me all week. The tension in my shoulders eased slightly. What about you? Going back to work on Monday is going to be a nightmare. He grimaced. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I studied him, the way his fingers tapped restlessly against the counter, the faint crease between his brows. You could quit. He barked another laugh. And do what? I don't know. Something that doesn't involve working for a man who steals credit and sleeps with interns. Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. You know, I actually had an idea about that. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothing it carefully on the counter between us. I've been working on this. Just sketches, really. It was a business plan. A good one. I scanned the pages, my eyebrows climbing. Ethan, this is incredible. His cheeks pinked. It's nothing. It's not nothing. I tapped the revenue projections. This system you designed, it's exactly what small businesses need. Simple, scalable, affordable. Yeah, well, he shrugged. Nobody at the office wanted to hear it. I looked up, meeting his gaze. I want to hear it. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or just surprise at being taken seriously. He launched into an explanation, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. The more he talked, the more animated he became, his earlier hesitancy melting away. I listened, really listened, for the first time in months. Maybe years. When he finally paused for breath, I didn't hesitate. Let me invest. Ethan froze. What? I have money from my grandmother's trust. It's just sitting there. I gestured to the papers. This is better than anything I could have dreamed up for it. He shook his head. Claire, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I leaned forward. I want to. Ethan stared at me, his dark eyes searching mine. You're serious. Dead serious. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 10, the sound echoing through the house. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. A dog barked. Life went on. Ethan exhaled sharply. Okay. He grinned, sudden and bright. But we're doing this properly. Equal partners. I extended my hand. Deal. His palm was warm against mine, his grip firm. We shook like that for a beat too long, neither of us in a hurry to let go. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. The spell shattered. Ethan dropped my hand. You should get that. I silenced the call. No, I shouldn't. We looked at each other for a long moment, the unspoken words hanging between us. Ethan cleared his throat. So, partners. Partners, I agreed. And just like that, the future opened up before us, wide and bright and full of possibility. The meeting. The coffee shop buzzed with mid-Monday energy, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and steamed milk. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table with 2 chairs facing the door. My fingers drummed against the laminated menu as I watched the entrance, my stomach twisting in a way that had nothing to do with the untouched croissant on my plate. Ethan arrived exactly on time, his leather jacket dusted with snowflakes that melted almost instantly in the warmth of the cafe. He carried a thick folder under one arm, and 2 fresh coffees balanced precariously in his free hand. You're late, I teased as he set 1 cup in front of me. He checked his watch, the same silver one from yesterday, and frowned. It's 10 o'clock on the dot. I was joking. Oh. His ears turned pink as he slid into the opposite chair. Right. I sipped the coffee. A caramel latte, sweet enough to make my teeth ache. Exactly how I liked it. Ethan remembered everything. He opened the folder with careful fingers, spreading papers across the table. I stayed up all night working on this. The dark circles under his eyes confirmed it. The documents before us were crisp and organized, each section tabbed with colorful sticky notes. Business licenses, tax forms, a detailed operations plan. I blinked. This is incredibly thorough. Ethan adjusted his glasses. I wanted to do it right. The contrast between this Ethan and the stammering intern from New Year's Eve was striking. The same sharp mind, but none of the hesitation. I pointed to one of the forms. We'll need to file this with the state first. He nodded. Already drafted the LLC paperwork. We bent over the documents together, our heads nearly touching as we reviewed each page. His cologne was subtle, something woodsy with a hint of citrus, and completely unlike Daniel's overpowering signature scent. Halfway through the financial projections, a shadow fell across our table. Well, isn't this cozy? Vanessa! She stood over us in a white wool coat, her lips painted the same dangerous red as her New Year's dress. Her gaze flicked between Ethan and me, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching. Ethan stiffened. I didn't. Vanessa! She tilted her head. I was just grabbing coffee before work and thought I'd say hello. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. How's Daniel? Ask him yourself. Oh, I have. She tapped manicured nails against her to-go cup. He's staying at the Marriott. Seems pretty broken up about everything. Ethan made a small noise in his throat. Vanessa's attention shifted to our paperwork. Starting a business together? How unexpected. I closed the folder with deliberate slowness. Was there something you needed? For a moment, something raw flashed across her face. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion from keeping up the charade. Then it was gone, smoothed back into perfect indifference. Just wanted you to know, she said lightly. that Daniel's telling everyone you had an emotional affair with the intern first. Ethan's head snapped up. That's not. Of course he is. I kept my voice even. Thanks for the heads up. Vanessa studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Good luck with whatever this is. She turned on her heel and left, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully behind her. Ethan exhaled sharply. She's lying, right? About Daniel saying that? I traced the rim of my coffee cup. Probably not. But we weren't. I know. The cafe noise swirled around us. The hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of other patrons, the clink of ceramic on tabletops. Normal sounds for a normal day. Except nothing about this was normal. Ethan's fingers curled into fists on the table. This could hurt the business before we even start. It could. I met his worried gaze. But only if we let it. He hesitated, then nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. So, where were we? I reopened the folder to the operations plan. Right here. I think we should. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. We need to talk about the house. I silenced it without responding. Ethan watched me carefully. You okay? Better than okay. I tapped the paper in front of us. This is the good part. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The beginning. 6 months later, the office smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I stood in the center of what would soon be our headquarters, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The space was empty except for 2 desks, a mountain of unpacked boxes, and Ethan, who was currently wrestling with an uncooperative office chair. It's supposed to have 5 wheels, he grumbled, holding up a loose caster. I bit back a laugh. Maybe read the instructions this time? He shot me a look, his hair sticking up in 5 different directions from running his hands through it all morning. Instructions are for people who aren't geniuses. Clearly. Our laughter echoed off the bare walls. It still felt surreal, the business license hanging on the wall, the stack of client contracts waiting to be signed, the way Ethan's Excel spreadsheets had transformed into something tangible. We'd named it Allegro Systems. Ethan's idea, a nod to both music and speed. I'd worried it was too abstract until our first client said it sounded cutting edge. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. Another text from Daniel. The 5th one this week. The lawyer says you're being unreasonable about the house. I deleted it without responding. The divorce proceedings were dragging on, but I'd stopped letting him take up space in my head. Some victories were quieter than others. Ethan finally conquered the chair and wheeled it toward me with a triumphant grin. For you, Madam CEO. I sank into it, spinning slowly. Very fancy. Only the best. He leaned against the other desk, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with ink smudges. So, first official day tomorrow. First official day, I echoed. A comfortable silence settled between us. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars honking, people rushing to lunch meetings, pigeons squabbling over crumbs. Normal chaos. Beautiful chaos. Ethan cleared his throat. I was thinking, we should celebrate tonight. Celebrate how? Dinner. Somewhere nice. He rubbed the back of his neck. Unless you have other plans. I studied him, the way his shoulders tensed just slightly, the hopeful tilt of his mouth, the smudge of ink near his hairline he'd missed in the mirror. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I'd love to. His whole face lit up. Great. 7 work for you. Perfect. The moment stretched, warm and weightless, until Ethan's phone shattered it with an obnoxious ringtone. Our first potential client. Business called. As he answered, I turned my chair toward the window, watching sunlight dance across the skyline. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably fuming in a too expensive suit. Vanessa was likely charming some new victim. And we were here, building something real. Ethan hung up with a whoop. That was Thompson Industries. They want the full package. I spun to face him, grinning. Told you they bite. He shook his head, laughing. Remind me to never doubt you. Never doubt me, I said immediately. Another laugh. Another glance. Another moment where the air between us crackled with something I wasn't ready to name. But I would be. Soon. End of story. Did this ending satisfy you? This emotional journey showed Claire's transformation from betrayed wife to confident entrepreneur with an intriguing hint of romance. Want more stories like this? Follow for powerful tales of reinvention where the underdog wins. Which character resonated with you most? Comment below.